Hi, everybody. Welcome to How to Make an Industry Change Without Starting Over. My name is Christian Hansen, and I'm a career coach who helps people make six-figure career moves. Now, we had this recording, we had the session last week, but there was just a couple tech issues, so I'm re-recording it to make sure that you get a great replay. So you are in the right place if you're someone who's wanting to make a career change, but you're not quite sure where to start. Or maybe you're somebody who has the qualifications and experience and you know where you want to go, but you're not quite sure what the first step is or how to get there. And especially you're in the right place if you have what it takes and you've been trying to make a career change for a bit, but you keep hitting some road bumps and you're trying to really make sure that you make this happen. We're going to be addressing one of the biggest opportunities and biggest challenges that people have when they're making a career change. That's framing your value in a way that other people quickly and easily understand. Okay. Now, a little bit about me, right? In my background, I've worked in higher education as well as in corporate HR, setting up internship programs. And all that experience has taught me how to help people like you learn how to stand up from the crowd, and especially when everybody else is trying to stand out too. Now, to start off today, I want to share two quick examples and stories about how making a career change is kind of like going to a completely different country. Now, if you're like me, you've probably had some opportunities to travel, and you've probably had some chances where you've made some really big cultural mistakes in the countries or places where you've gone to, right? Where you just don't quite understand the culture. And today I'm going to share one of my most embarrassing travel stories, and then we're going to connect it to how it connects to making a career change. So I used to live in Korea, South Korea, love it there. It's a fantastic country. And when I was kind of new in the country, my Korean was pretty bad. I mean, it's a language that's made out of circles and sticks. It's really hard to learn. Well, I knew enough to kind of put some phrases together, and we were eating at a Korean barbecue place. Korean barbecue is absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to tell the owner of the restaurant that the food was so good that I died and gone to heaven, right? Now, I'd heard that in Korean, they have this phrase, and pretty much any culture, they have something similar to this. So got out my dictionary, I was writing it out, practicing my phrasing, and I had my sentence ready to go. So I was really proud. And we're walking out the door, and I go to the owner and I say, thank you so much. And I said to him, 음식이 너무 맛있어서 돌아가고 싶습니다. And I smiled and I was really happy because I thought I had just, delivered the best punchline on earth. But instead of, a chuckle or a laugh or an encouraging smile from from a Korean who he knows I'm trying to learn his language, he just looked at me with shock and with horror. And so he just, and it was just kind of quiet. It was all quiet in the restaurant, and the other people in the restaurant turned and looked at me too. And eventually I just nervously walked out. And my buddy who I was with, he's like, "What did you say?" And I said, "Well, 음식이 맛있어서 돌아가고 싶습니다." The food was so good, I want to die. Literally, that's what I said. And he just burst out laughing. I'm like, "Well, what's so funny?" He's like, "Well, the word you just used for to die is a really taboo kind of word. There's to die, which is normal death, but the verb that you used for to die in Korean, it means to die with glory and honor befitting a worthy ancestor, right? And it's a very, in English there isn't really a comparison to this word, but it's like to pass away, and to do so with honor and to respect. So I was saying, basically, this food is so delicious, I will now go and die a glorious death of honor. And it was so awkward, right? It was just not in the right place. And we didn't go back to that Korean barbecue. I was just too embarrassed. Well, later, a couple years later, I was working in South Korea. My Korean was a lot better, and I learned what the appropriate phrase was to say, this food is so good, I've died and gone to heaven, and it's 둘이 먹다가 하나 죽어도 모르겠어요. Means two guys are eating, if one of them dies, the food's going to be so good, he won't even know the difference, right? That's the Korean way of saying this. So I was working for LG Electronics. I was helping set up some internship programs. And the first day that I was there, my team took me out to dinner. And so, the food was great, and they didn't quite understand that my Korean was as good as it was. And so my colleague leaned over during dinner and he asked in English, how do you like the food? And I said the phrase, but I said the very beginning of it, which is the traditional Korean way of starting this phrase. And it's "tori 먹다가," right? I was like, "tori 먹다가." And his eyes just went big as plates. And he said, "You know that phrase?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he nudged his buddy next to him. He says, "Hanson over here just said "tori 먹다가," and he was like, he knows that phrase. And the entire room all of a sudden exploded in, "Oh my gosh, you know that phrase in our culture? "tori 먹다가 하나 죽어도 모르겠어요," right? Now, here's the thing. And instantly I was welcomed in the group, and they understood that I understood their culture and their language to a point where I had this phrase, or sokdam in Korean. It's a phrase, right? A popular traditional phrase. Now, what's interesting, right? Whether I was saying 음식이 너무 맛있어서 돌아가고 싶습니다, or 둘이 먹다가 하나 죽어도 모르겠어요, right? I was essentially saying the exact same thing. The first one is technically and grammatically correct, but it was not culturally correct, right? I was speaking Korean, but one way was speaking not just the language, but the culture. And speaking the culture and the framing and what they were expecting is what made all the difference. Now, when we're trying to, switch careers and you're trying to get into, a new company, you need to be able to think. I mean, it's kind of like moving to a different country, right? And, just like you take the time to learn about a country and to go, understand their worldview or their perspective, same things to happen when you are applying to a new job in a new company or a new industry, because they are a different tribe. And you want them to understand your skill set and your value in their culture, not just their language, but in their culture. And that's what we're going to be covering today. So, how can you do that? Well, if you can speak and communicate your value in terms that they understand in their culture and their native language, so to speak, you've just increased your chance of getting in the job, and you've increased your chances of not having to start over from scratch in that industry, because again, you're communicating in their language and culture. So real quick, 30,000-foot view of where these ideas comes from and why I'm really, focused on this. Well, in my career, as I was reviewing and interviewing thousands and thousands of applications, I realized, gosh, I have a front row seat in seeing how people deal with one of the biggest challenges. And that is, how do you stand out when everybody else is trying to stand out too? And the techniques that I'm going to be sharing today have helped people get director level 6-figure positions. So I know that these things work, and I know that these strategies are going to help you stand out when everybody else is trying to stand out too. So my goal for you today, right? I want to help you raise your game, and also I want to help you implement these ideas later. So I'm going to be opening up my calendar for some free implementation coaching calls, and plus, any chance you would like to meet with me for some private one-on-one coaching on how you can better position and sell your value. And I would love to help you out with that. So let's first talk about some of the problems that you're facing when you're trying to stand out from the crowd. Now, I'm going to hop over to the whiteboard here so we can get this right, okay? So here's the thing, is that I would say the number one problem, okay, when it comes to try to frame your value and your experience in a way that people quickly and understand, is that we do not enter the conversation that's happening in the heads of recruiters, okay? So I'm going to say convo in their head, okay? Now, what I mean by this is, recruiters, we often are approaching them with applications saying how smart, capable, qualified, and passionate we are. The problem is that, think about it, recruiters aren't sitting there going, gosh, if only I had somebody who's applying for this job and, who is passionate enough, right? No, that is not what's happening in their head. Rather, they have a problem that their company needs to solve, and they're looking for people who can solve that problem. And if this problem isn't solved, it keeps people up at night, right? There are some bad things that happen to this company if this problem is missed opportunities, right? If the problem isn't solved. So the first thing is that we need to frame your language to match the conversation that's happening inside the heads of recruiters. And that is addressing the problems that they're going to be solving, okay? The second biggest, most common problem I find is that our language it misses the opportunity. It misses the moment, right? So I'm just going to say language misses the moment. Now, what I mean by that is, okay, look, 99% of the time, you and I live and operate in what I call the performance environment, okay? Now, in the performance environment, okay, that's like, in your job or in school, right? Success is based on how well you perform, right? Literally. So, in your job, you are accustomed to showing that you're smart, capable, and qualified, and that you can do the job well. Well, so this equals what I call the achievement mindset. We're trying to show how good and achievement oriented we are and successful at that. Well, the problem is that when you enter into a job interview or a networking opportunity, you are not in the performance environment anymore. You are in what I call the selective environment. Okay. And the goal of the selective environment is to stand out. It's to influence people to choose you. So here's the thing. If you don't understand that the game has changed and that you're walking into a job interview and where you're trying to influence someone to choose you, but you are simply just saying, well, I can prove that I'm capable and qualified, you're going to sound just like everybody else, and you're not going to stand out compared to everyone else. So the message misses, the language misses the moment. And what I mean by that is, this is the mindset that the recruiters are in. They're in the selective environment, being overwhelmed and overloaded with too many choices. And if you walk in speaking in terms of how capable and qualified, then you're going to be adding to the noise that's distracting and getting in the way of recruiters to be able to quickly identify and understand you. Okay. Now, the third problem that we got to talk about here is this concept of tribes. Okay. That you are outside of the tribe. Okay. So what I mean by this is, think about your company or your industry kind of like a tribe. A tribe has its own culture, its own language, its own ways of thinking or views in the world, right? And similarly, where you're trying to go to is a different tribe with their own culture, thinking, language, and ways of thinking. Here's the thing, is that in the performance environment, you have learned how to get ahead. You are within your own tribe, and you've learned the skills of how to get ahead inside the tribe. But the thing is, when you're trying to get into a new company or an industry, you're not inside the tribe. You're outside trying to get in. So we got to understand that if you're outside, the skills that help you get ahead don't necessarily help you get in. And we need to have a different frame of mind, okay? And, and especially it comes into speaking the language and framing your value so that other people on the inside of the tribe are going to understand you when you're from the outside. So real quick, again, some of the three biggest challenges that faces people when they're, trying to get in is that their language does not fit in the conversation that's happening in recruiters' brains, right? Which is very problem focused. Number two, our language misses the moment because often we're speaking in performance environment language, not selective environment language. And then number three, people don't understand, or they're not thinking the fact that they're outside of the tribe and all the skill sets that they have are designed to help them move ahead. And instead of moving ahead, you're trying to go into a tribe, not within one. Okay, does that make sense? So these are kind of the three mindset things we have to overcome if you're going to make an industry change without having to start over. So let's start with a couple solutions here of how to do this. We're gonna have some real framing techniques that are going to help you communicate, a lot clearer here. So the first thing, let's talk a little bit about tribes, right? And especially about this industry or the company that you're trying to get into. My question is, what makes them a tribe, right? How come all these people get together, and how come all these people in this company or this industry, how come they meet and congregate on a regular basis, thus forming a tribe? Well, to put it simply, that these people are a tribe because they are focused on solving a problem, right? So my question for you is, what is one of the problems, or what are the series of problems that this industry or company primarily solve, right? Number two, within a company, within a tribe or an industry, you have sub problems. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is You have a marketing team or an HR team or a finance or strategy or sales team, right? These are sub problems. So if the overarching, take a company, their overarching thing is to solve a big problem, then what are the sub problems that the many departments within an industry or a company are trying to solve? If you can speak inside, pertaining to the problems that these people are trying to solve, you are speaking in the language, you're entering the conversation that's happening inside recruiters' brains. Okay. So my next question though is, what are the obstacles that get in the way of your company or industry solving the main problem? What is that get in the way of the sub problems being solved? Why are they obstacles there? What is the reason that they're a problem and hard to solve? Here's the thing, is that if you can understand and speak to the obstacles that are standing in the way, as well as how you can solve the sub problems and the main problems, you're going to be standing out from everybody else, and you're entering the conversation that's happening in their head. So for example, I'm going to give an example in a few minutes here about how I was able to transition into ultra high net worth finance from higher education. And the thing is that I found out that the problem of this industry that they're trying to solve is to help extremely wealthy people live more fulfilled lives. And one of the problems that they had, that's their goal. The problem is that, extremely wealthy people have a lot of stuff, but they don't have a lot of time to take care of or want to deal with all this stuff. So the problem that this company that I work for solved is that they took on the management of the problems, and so that, very wealthy people could just live the life that they wanted to live. Now, the sub problem in the department that I was in of this story, again, we're going to talk about this in depth here in a minute, was that they wanted to build better, they needed people who could communicate clearly and build really good business relationships and increase the amount of sales and opportunities and business development that were bringing in new business and opportunities to the business, right? That was a sub problem. So that was their goal. The sub problem then was that they were struggling to, they have all these Excel sheet whizzes who could, talk numbers all day long, but they weren't very good at, the relationship building and the building connections part. And because of that, the company wasn't able to bring in as much revenue as they wanted. And the obstacles to each of these was, well, it was a very competitive space for the big problem. The sub problems that they dealt with, a lot of their employees were struggling to build authentic relationships quickly and easily, right? And there's a number of other problems that were happening. So here's the thing. If you can identify, again, the main problem of the industry, talk about how you're interested in that, the sub problem that your individual department is going to be dealing with, and then what are the obstacles that are getting in the way of those, all of them, then you're going to be speaking in the language that's going to be inside the brains of the recruiters. So let's now talk about another thing here, okay? And that is, and if you want, put in the comments here, because this is on YouTube, what you think about that and how this is helpful, right? What kind of problems is your industry trying to solve, and what kind of sub problems or what kind of problems is your company trying to solve, your target company, and what are the sub problems that your individual department is going to solve? Next, I want to talk about another part of the conversation that's happening inside of recruiters' brains, and that is risk. Okay, here's the deal: it's that recruiters, they put people, when they're going through applications, into 3 buckets of risk. Okay, there's the low risk, there's the accepted, amount of risk, and then there's the high risk. Okay, so here's the thing: is that you don't want to be perceived as a high risk person. You want to be seen as either a low risk or an acceptable level of risk person. Now, how does this happen? Well, there are 2 things. You have industry and you have role experience, right? You've worked in an industry, say, healthcare, or maybe it was, tech or finance, right? And within the industry, you have role experience. Maybe that's marketing. Maybe that's, HR. And marketing can be an industry too, but it just depends on your specific role within your job. Well, how you can, and here's how HR reps and recruiters look at this. If your current industry and role lines up exactly with your future and your targeted industry and role, then you are low risk, right? You've been in the industry and you're going to continue in the industry, and you've done the role and you're just doing the role at a higher level. That is a low risk scenario, and they know that you are going to be really successful in the job. Now, within the acceptable risk, right? There's two things here, and that is, well, if you're going to leverage one of these things. So let's say, you're in an industry, right? And you want to switch, and you're going to do so by being in the same role, right? So you want to switch industries, but you want to leverage your experience in that role. So for example, let's say, you're in healthcare and you want to go into tech. Well, what role are you in healthcare? And then you can leverage that. Now, when you communicate that I want to leverage my experience as a marketer, or whatever your role is, that is communicating to HR people that you are a normal, acceptable risk. Also, the other way you can do it is just simply reverse this, right? Let's say you are in a role and you're gonna but you want to you just move to a different role within the industry. Okay, that's another very acceptable if you leverage one of these things, at least either your role or your industry experience. That's another way of being able to communicate to HR reps that you are an acceptable normal risk. Now, if you are trying to go into a completely new industry and role from a different industry and role, then you are a high risk to HR reviewers, and you want to avoid that. Okay, so again, the conversation that's happening in recruiters' heads is that they're concerned about the amount of risk that you're bringing to the table, right? If you can leverage, and you literally say, I want to leverage my industry and role experience, right, or experience in this role, or I want to leverage my experience in this role, or I want to leverage my industry experience. That is how you enter the conversation inside a recruiter's head, and you're able to assuage their fears that whether or not you're a high risk or normal, right, you're a low risk person. Okay, so again, the phrase that I want you to think about is what is the experience that you're trying to leverage into your new role? That's how you make an industry switch, especially in this situation, right? You're going to leverage your role experience. That's how you make an industry switch without having to start over. Okay. Next, and then this is the third and kind of final point I want to make here, and that is pain points, right? Well, literacy on pain points. Now, what I mean by this is every industry has pain points that they're trying to solve. Now, we kind of touched on this in speaking about problems that you're trying to solve and the sub problems that you're trying to solve. And, a lot of times people begin the process just by, the job search process by just putting in their application or just sending in their resume. And they don't take the time to understand the pain points and the conversation points that's happening in the language of their respective industries. And so this takes a little bit of research. And so I want to, again, share my story here. So I wanted to switch from higher education into ultra high net worth finance. And that is about as wide of a leap as you possibly can make in a career. Well, I was able to successfully do it because I gained literacy in the pain points of the industry, and especially in the role that I was trying to get into. So how I did this was literally I researched online. I read everything I could about the company. I did research on their website, any news articles. I then from there started to have conversations with people inside the industry, right? I talked with people who are at other companies. I talked with people at competing companies, people who had retired, and I just gained an understanding of what the pain points were in this industry. Then I was, did some networking, and that's probably going to be another training we're going to do in the future is on networking. But I was able to get a breakfast appointment with the guy who was the hiring manager for the role. It's very kind of bespoke industry, and there's a lot of, high touch. And so he wanted to really see my interpersonal skills. I kid you not, for this 45-minute breakfast conversation or what have you, I prepared about 15 hours of understanding what exactly was going on and understanding, the industry and the language that they're speaking. I learned the language and the culture of what they were doing. It took a lot of time. So, then, and what I did was I found the pain point, right? I found the pain point of what he was feeling. Now, his job was, he was a client advisor. And so he was the interfacing and he had great social skills, but his team underneath them that he was trying to train and raise up, they were fantastic at Excel sheets. They were great at keeping all their ducks in the row. But the moment you put one of his, training, his team members in front of an actual client, the client's eyes would just glaze over because these people didn't know how to communicate. They didn't know how to establish relationships of trust quickly or how to make an emotional connection, or they didn't know how to keep people's attention. So here's what I did, right? I framed my experience in terms of this. I said, I have this industry of higher education. Now I'm trying to get into the ultra high net worth industry. And I had to show him how my role was a natural, clear leveraging and transition over to this new industry. And the way I did it was, I said, look, in my current industry, I help people make high consideration, life-changing decisions. And in this role, I understand the emotions and the thought processes that people go through when they're making major life decisions. Now, in your industry, in your job, you're essentially doing the exact same thing. The difference in money is a lot more, but money doesn't really matter. People are still going through the exact same emotional journey when they're making life-changing decisions. And I understand that. Now, so I see myself as transitioning really the role here. I'm going to be leveraging my role experience in guiding people and doing business development, relationship management. But all that lacks is I just got to learn, some of the technical parts, and I can be really successful at this. Because I've already been very successful in this role in bringing in new business, and bringing in new students and everything from around the world, convincing them to come here. My communication abilities, I want to do the same thing, but just in a different environment. Through doing that, right, and speaking to his pain points of understanding he was struggling to get people who could sell, do business development, build relationships quickly and effectively, I was able to successfully make a transition into the career, right, into a different career path. Because I got into the conversation that was already entering into his head, because I was, speaking in terms of getting into a new tribe, showing that I'm leveraging experience that I always had and putting it into language that he understood and speaking to and solving the pain points that he had, I was able to communicate in such a way that he quickly and easily understood my value, and I was able to get the job. And it was a really important job that I desperately needed for my career. So these are just a couple points, right? Now I have here, I'm going to put on, there's a link down at the bottom, a worksheet that I call the Personal Positioning Worksheet. Now I've used this in previous trainings, and I think it's really, really important. I'm bringing it up again. What I want you to do is think about so the question number one is, what is the core problem you want to solve in your prospective role? And that's a good question. But for this exercise, I want you to ask, what is the core problem they want you to solve in your prospective role? Let's dive into this problem. Why is it a problem? Okay. Answer then, who are the key stakeholders that are affected? Where's the gap that exists? What's the pain point, right? If this problem remains unsolved? What are the benefits if it's fixed? And what makes you the best person to bridge this gap, right? So in case of the story I just told, if I was able to frame it, and I did frame it in terms of there's a gap between your team members and the clients and their ability to communicate effectively, and I can help bridge that gap by learning the technical skills, but also understanding the emotional journey that people go through when they make high consideration, life-changing decisions. I framed it in that way, and I did almost this exact same worksheet, this exercise, excuse me, and it made all the difference. So download this and reframe it again. Instead of what is the core problem you want to solve, change it to what is the problem they want you to solve or they need you to solve in this prospective role. I would love to meet with you and see how I can help you brainstorm about how you can stand out by focusing on the problem here. So again, my link for the calendar is below. Feel free to sign up for a slot. Again, I'd love to help personalize, coach you to help you implement this so you can take your career to the next level. All right. So in this session, we've covered a lot of material, right? We talked about, first of all, the problems that people face. Number one, like not entering the conversation that's happening in people's heads. When we're speaking to them, our message misses the moment a lot of the times because we're speaking to the performance environment, not the selective environment, right? And we're also talking about how, let's see, I got my notes right here, got a lot of stuff. Talked about tribes and that people don't understand that the strategies that they have are really good at getting ahead, but they're not necessarily as helpful as getting in. Then to solve that, we talked about what makes a company or an industry a tribe, specifically, what is the problems they're trying to solve, what are the sub-problems, and what are the obstacles. If you can speak to those things, then you're going to stand out. Talk about leveraging, how to become a low risk, an acceptable risk, and avoiding being a high risk person by leveraging your industry experience and role experience. And then talk about gaining literacy about the pain points that your company or prospective company or industry has, and showcasing how you solve those specific pain points. Because if I walked into this interview simply showing that I'm smart, capable, qualified, and passionate, I would have lost his interest because he's walking in with a pain point and he's not looking for someone with just a buffet of solutions. He wanted to know that I could solve his specific thing. Then to answer all this, to help you apply this and to personally learn how to position yourself, talked about the personal positioning worksheet. And again, please download it, do some research, use it, okay? And I'd love to meet with you one-on-one and see how I can help you take your career and your value to the next level. So this kind of wraps up the training for today, you guys. So grateful that you could spend it with me and you can watch it. I hope this is helpful. More importantly, I want it to help you think at a higher level, because if you're thinking at a higher level, you're going to communicate at a higher level. And if you can communicate at a higher level, then you'll be seen as a strategic thinker, which in my book, The Influence Mindset, fascinating piece of research, just want to share it with you. When you are perceived to be a strategic thinker, something amazing happens. It says, being perceived as a strategic thinker was twice as important as having strong communication skills and almost 50 times more effective than being merely highly skilled. If you want to stand out from the crowd, influence decision makers to choose you and take your career to the next level, these strategies and how you frame and position and these communication techniques are going to help you do that. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to serving you next time, and put in the comments what has been most helpful, what has stood out to you, and be sure to sign up for one of my one-on-one coaching slots where we can go over your personal positioning worksheet, because I want to help you take your career to the next level. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon.